For a decade, we welcomed them into our home every Sunday. When tragedy struck and we lost everything in a fire, we reached out to ask if we could stay with them for a week. Just until the insurance settled, I pleaded with them, but my son-in-law chuckled dismissively. "We're not running a shelter," he remarked. My daughter handed me a flyer for a motel. For 3 nights, I found myself sleeping in our charred car until I remembered a copy of the will I'd stashed away in my desk drawer. My name is Frank, and I am Shashante Shu. I've never been one to ask for much. My entire career was spent as a machine repair technician, while my wife Carol contributed as a part-time worker in a school cafeteria until her knees gave way. We were prudent, saving diligently as we raised our daughter Megan in a modest brick house on Rivermont Avenue in Lynchburg, Virginia. Though it wasn't extravagant, it was home. For over 10 years, we hosted Sunday dinners, with Megan and her husband Brad never missing a single gathering. We took care of the groceries, handled the cooking, and cleaned up afterward. They would come with their 2 daughters, park in our driveway, relax on our couch, eat from our plates, and leave without lifting a finger. They always expressed their gratitude, and we assumed that was sufficient. We thought they genuinely appreciated our hospitality. I no longer hold that belief. The fire occurred on a dry Thursday, October 17th, an electrical malfunction in the laundry. Room sparked ablaze. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard a strange buzzing pop, followed by Carol's terrified scream. By the time I grabbed a fire extinguisher, it was too late. The smoke enveloped us, thick and black. I managed to pull Carol out through the front door, and we stood in the yard, helplessly watching our lives go up in flames. In less than an hour, we lost half a lifetime's worth of memories, cherished photographs, Carol's treasured recipes, and the table my father had crafted for us on our wedding day, all reduced to ashes. After the firefighters departed, we sat silently on the curb, Carol holding my hand and sobbing while I was left in a state of numbness. That night, the Red Cross provided us with a place to sleep, cold soup and fold-out cots in a local shelter with no privacy. I couldn't bear the thought of Carol enduring that discomfort again. Her legs were swollen, and her back was giving her trouble. The next morning, I called Megan. "Megan, we just need a few days, a week at most, until the insurance check comes through." There was a long pause on the line before Brad chimed in. "Frank, I don't think that's gonna work." Confusion washed over me. "What do you mean? We have the girls' sports schedules, Megan's work, and I work from home. We're already stretched thin. Do you think I want this?" My voice cracked with emotion. "We fed you every week for a decade. We watched your kids when you wanted. Our date nights. I even taught your eldest how to ride a bike." "I'm sorry," Megan finally replied, though her tone lacked sincerity. She sounded more afraid than remorseful. "It's just not a good time." Moments later, she texted me a photo of a motel flyer. A no-frills roadside establishment charging $49 a night with no website, no Wi-Fi, and no security. They offered no assistance with the cost. I stared at the image, feeling something inside me break. We couldn't afford a motel. Our funds were tied up, and the insurance company had informed us it would take at least 3 weeks to process our claim. So we slept in the car. Our Buick sat in the remnants of what used to be our home, still reeking of burnt plastic. I fashioned a makeshift pillow from some old towels I found in the trunk. Carol cried herself to sleep the first night, and on the second night she fell silent. By the third night I reached my breaking point. I awoke before dawn with a splitting backache. That's when I remembered the drawer. In the back office I had an old wooden desk from the 70s. In the bottom drawer, I had created a false panel years ago to store some private belongings. Letters, a copy of my uncle's will, and the land deeds he had left for me. I hadn't touched it in years. I told Carol to wait in the car and carefully navigated through what remained of our living room. The floor creaked ominously beneath me, and the walls bore the marks of smoke damage. I unearthed a drawer from beneath a pile of charred ceiling tiles, and to my relief, it was intact. The folder inside was fireproof and securely sealed. I opened it right there amidst the ashes. Inside, I found the will, the deed, and my name. 3 plots of land in Amherst County. One contained a dilapidated hunting cabin, while the other 2 were wooded and deemed useless at the time. However, a friend from the city planning office had informed me just 2 weeks prior that the land had been rezoned and a development company was eyeing the area. The value was about to surge, unbeknownst to anyone, including Brad. He had always assumed I was financially strained, which is why he treated me with such disdain, like I was a relic of the past, just a burden waiting to fade away. He was mistaken. The following day, I contacted the developer. I informed them that I wasn't ready to sell just yet, but I was interested in their offer. They revealed they had been authorized to go as high as $480,000 for all 3 plots. I nearly dropped the phone in disbelief. Grateful, I hung up, and a clear personal plan began to form in my mind. 3 days later, I walked into a diner in downtown Lynchburg and requested to speak with the editor of the local newspaper. I had a story that the community needed to hear. He listened attentively and asked for proof. I presented him with photographs of our Sunday dinners and the motel flyer my daughter had sent. I shared everything with him. When he inquired if I was certain about going public, I affirmed my decision. The editor's name was Dennis, and he was about my age, having grown up in the same town. I showed him pictures on my phone, Megan and Brad at our dinner table, their children playing on our swing set, and Megan holding a Christmas pie that Carol had baked. I had preserved over 100 Sunday dinner photos. Then I showed him the motel flyer Megan had sent. He scrutinized it for a long moment. "Are you saying your daughter, your only child, turned you away after losing your home in a fire?" He asked incredulously. 3 nights we slept in the car, I replied. I gave them everything I could. We never once asked for help until now. And now, I'm done pretending they're good people. Dennis ran the story, titling it, "Local Couple Burned Out of Home, Turned Away by Own Daughter." It was featured on the front page, A1 in full color, on a Tuesday. The newspaper featured a photo of Carol and me from last Christmas, proudly holding a ham in front of our tree, our smiles reflecting a belief in family that now felt naive. Within just 2 days, our story began to circulate. A local radio host read it aloud, and Channel 13 aired a segment. Conversations erupted at the grocery store and the post office. One day, while I was at Walgreens, a woman I had never met stopped me, embraced me tightly, and shared how her daughter had done something similar years ago. Her name was Janine, and we both found ourselves in tears in the allergy aisle. However, the real wave of attention came the following weekend when I decided to take action. I commissioned a graphic designer to create a large sign with bold black letters on a white background, simple yet powerful. I nailed it to the charred remains of our house, proclaiming, "We fed our daughter and her husband every Sunday for 10 years. Our house burned down. They gave us a motel flyer. Below that, I attached a flyer for the motel. People began to gather, snapping pictures and sharing them online. A local pastor even left flowers on our porch, and a group of teenagers showed up to help rake the yard. Megan and Brad, on the other hand, initially fell silent. Soon enough, the text began, starting with, "Dad, what the hell are you doing? Take the sign down. You're making us look bad." I chose not to respond, so Brad called me, his tone sharp and urgent. "You need to take that damn sign down. Right now. You're embarrassing your family." "Family?" I retorted. "You made it clear I didn't have one anymore." I hung up, ignoring his 6 subsequent calls. The next twist came a week later when a different real estate agent contacted me about the land in Amherst County. He informed me that the developer had increased their offer to $570,000 if I agreed within 48 hours. I said I would consider it, and then I reached out to Megan. When she answered, I said, "There's something you don't know, and you're going to feel its effects soon." The line fell silent before she hung up. A few hours later, Brad showed up at the motel where Carol and I had finally managed to check in. He didn't knock, but simply approached the door while I sat outside smoking, clad in his blazer still. Trying to maintain the facade of importance despite everything, he stated, "We need to talk." I leaned back, arching an eyebrow. "Now you want to talk?" He took a seat across from me as if we were equals. "You're ruining your daughter's reputation," he chastised. "She did that herself," I shot back, and he laughed, thinking I was being unreasonable. "She's stressed. She has the girls and work." "She didn't know what to do," he explained. "She knew how to text me a motel flyer," I countered. Brad leaned in, lowering his voice. "I know about the land. I know it has value. If you're considering leaving it to Megan, just remember she doesn't need drama attached to her name. It might be better if we keep this quiet. At that moment, I realized he assumed I intended to leave everything to her. He had no clue that I had changed my will just 2 days prior, nor did he understand that the land was now destined for someone else. I had one final surprise planned. This revenge was not solely about the money. It was about demonstrating to them that kindness is not a sign of weakness, that age does not equate to powerlessness, and that being forgotten does not mean being gone. I was far from finished after Brad's attempt to sweet-talk his way back into my good graces. It was clear I had instilled fear in them, not through what I said, but through what I chose not to reveal. They were left guessing, and they were guessing wrong. 3 days prior to our meeting, I had already visited an estate attorney in town, requesting a complete overhaul of my will. I brought with me the deed copies, the developer's offer letter, and a folder containing proof that Megan and Brad had not assisted us after the fire. The attorney looked at me and asked, "Are you sure you want to cut your daughter out completely?" "I'm not cutting her out," I replied firmly. "She cut herself out. I'm merely finalizing the paperwork." Instead of Megan, I named someone else as the heir. Her name was Angie, a waitress at a diner near my old home. She had brought hot meals to Carol when she broke her hip 3 years prior, never asking for anything in return. She would leave casseroles in our mailbox when she thought we weren't home. When she heard about the fire, she arrived that same week with 2 bags of groceries and a sleeping bag, offering to help us clear the lot. Angie was a single mother raising her 10-year-old son after losing her husband in a work accident 3 years ago. Despite her own struggles, she gave more than many who had much more to spare. So I decided to leave everything to her and her son. All the land, the future payouts, and all rights. I instructed my attorney to ensure that Megan wouldn't see a single cent. Then came a church fundraiser. A small Baptist church in Forest, having seen the newspaper story, reached out to ask if they could assist us. I told them we didn't need money, but they insisted on helping. The following Sunday, they organized a potluck and auction to raise funds for the couple known for their Sunday dinners and their burned-down home. Over 200 people attended. A local artist donated a painting, and a retired firefighter offered his prized knife set. People cried as they embraced us. Carol, who hadn't smiled in weeks, finally did that day. Later that same afternoon, a man in a suit approached me, claiming to represent another developer who had heard the news. "I own those 3 lots in Amherst," he said, offering $600,000 up front. No games, no waiting. I said I would think it over. That night, I invited Angie and her son to come out to the land with me. I showed them the old hunting cabin, which was run down but structurally sound. We walked through the woods together, and she remarked that it was the first time in 5 years she had felt a sense of peace. At that moment, I handed her the developer's business card, knowing that her life was about to change for the better. Call him if you ever want to sell," I said to Angie, "but please don't feel obligated." She looked at me as if I'd lost my mind. "No one's ever given me anything like this before," she replied, her voice filled with disbelief. "You earned it," I assured her. Meanwhile, Megan had started appearing in places where she knew I might be. First, it was the grocery store, then the post office. One day, she even accidentally showed up at the diner while I was having lunch. Each time, she acted as if nothing had happened. "Hey, Dad, how are you?" she would say. I would nod and continue on my way, avoiding any real engagement. As time passed, her desperation grew. She showed up at the motel and knocked on our door. Carol answered, and Megan pushed past her as if she still had a right to be in our lives. "Dad, we need to talk," she insisted. Carol sat on the edge of the bed, deliberately looking away. She hadn't spoken to Megan since the fire. I stood up and faced Megan squarely. "No, you need to listen," I said firmly. Megan crossed her arms defiantly. "You're acting like we kicked you out on purpose. It was just a hard time. We helped. You with your kids, fixed your plumbing, gave you gas money. That was during our hard times. We never made excuses." She didn't respond to my silence. "I changed the will," I said. "You're not in it anymore." Her expression fell in shock. "You're serious?" "I gave it to someone who acted like family when you didn't," I replied. She began to cry. "So that's it? You're just cutting us off?" "No," I countered. "You did that already. I'm just finally catching up. With tears streaming down her face, she left. An hour later, Brad called and left a voicemail. You'll regret this. You're blowing up your family over a misunderstanding. I deleted it without listening to the end because it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was clarity, and I was only getting started. A month passed, and the motel room, felt more like a prison. The walls were thin, and the carpet reeked of mildew. Carol struggled to walk across the parking lot without holding onto my arm. We still hadn't heard a word from the insurance company, but the community continued to rally around us. People we barely knew brought casseroles, and one man offered to rebuild our front steps, recalling how he used to sit on them as a child, waiting for his dad to finish plumbing work inside our home. Carol cried again, but this time it was a different kind of cry, not one that empties you, but one that fills you back up. Then came the school auction. Angie called me the night before to inform me that they were auctioning off sponsorship spots for the new school gym. The biggest donors would have their names on plaques on the wall. You should come by just to watch, she suggested. I knew exactly where this was heading. Brad was on the school board and had been boasting about securing the McInnes name on the wall for months. There were 12 sponsorship spots available. That night, I borrowed a button-up shirt, shaved, and folded a check into my pocket before heading to the school. I waited until Brad and Megan arrived, all smiles and handshakes, acting like they owned the place. Megan wore a fitted beige coat that made her look like she was running for office. As the auction began, Brad kept increasing his bids. $500 here, $1,000 there, trying to secure the top spot. When the auctioneer announced the highest sponsorship, I raised my hand and said, $10,000. The room fell silent. Brad looked confused, then his expression shifted as realization dawned on him. I walked up to the auctioneer and handed over the check. Make the plaque read, in memory of those who show up when family doesn't. The crowd erupted in applause. Brad stood frozen, staring at the floor, while Megan wouldn't meet my gaze. A few weeks later, Carol and I finally received the insurance payout. It wasn't enough to fully rebuild our home. The fire inspector had noted too many structural risks, and our payout wouldn't cover starting fresh on that lot. But I already had a different plan in mind. I called Angie to ask if her boys still like to fish. She said they did. So I purchased a prefab 2-bedroom cabin and had it installed on the wooded lot beside the old hunting cabin. It had new sidings, solar panels, and a small deck with a swing. I registered it under Angie's name and her son's without telling her until it was complete. But when she saw it, she cried, and her boy ran around in circles on the deck. I handed her the keys and said, "You don't owe me anything, but if you ever make Sunday dinner, save me a plate." That should have been the end of the story, but karma doesn't run on a schedule. 2 months later, Brad was fired. It turned out he had been pushing a shady real estate deal behind the school board's back, and someone reported him after auction. Night! Rumors circulated that it was another board member who was fed up with Brad's arrogance. Not long after, Megan attempted to launch a parenting blog, but the townspeople remembered the newspaper story. The comment section quickly devolved into chaos, forcing her to shut it down within a week. They lost face and friends. One by one, neighbors stopped responding to their calls, and even their children received the silent treatment at school. I didn't orchestrate any of that. It simply happened. Carol and I moved into a small rental on the edge of town, owned by a woman from the church who offered us a deal, saying it was an honor to have us. She even planted roses out front, knowing how much Carol missed hers. Every Sunday, we continued to share dinner with someone. Sometimes with Angie, sometimes with Janine from Walgreens, or families from church. These were real people, the kind who don't hand out motel flyers when you lose everything. I saw Megan one last time at the gas station on the edge of town. She stood at pump 3, staring blankly at her car as it filled. I walked past her, on my way inside. She looked older, weary, as if whatever she had been chasing had already slipped through her fingers. Dad, she said softly. I glanced at her and she attempted a smile. How are you? I didn't answer immediately. I just nodded. Hope you're well, she added, almost in a whisper. I didn't respond. What do you say to someone who sat at your table every Sunday for a decade only to let you sleep in a burned-out car? I walked inside, purchased a soda, then walked back out and kept going. That's how it ended. Not with a fight, not with a scream, but with silence and something more. profound than anger. It was peace, the kind you earn, the kind you build board by board after everything has fallen apart.